All right, so welcome. This is the part where I try to keep you from falling asleep after all the pastry. I didn't eat the pastry. This is my reward cookies if I do a good job, so we'll see how it goes. A few years back, I decided I wanted to be more involved in figuring out how the systems that I were building and maintaining maintained their stability, how they were performing. And so I took some time to either find or modify or even build some tools of my own to monitor those and tell me what the capacity was, what the performance was, all of that. And that was great. It worked really well for me. And then people noticed that that's what I was doing, and they wanted me to monitor their shit with my shit. And that was where everything started to become more interesting. There's something interesting that happens when you do that. You start to get questions that you didn't have to answer when it was just your stuff. For the record, it wasn't that. Wasn't that either. Or that. Or that. But I felt like that after having to build monitoring for everybody else. So there were a certain set of questions that kept coming back over and over again. And so the title for my talk, The 4 Questions Every Monitoring Engineer Gets Asked. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. First off, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Leon Adato. I've worked in IT for about 30 years now. I've been doing monitoring for 20 of those years in companies that were small or large or sort of ludicrously large along the way. I'm currently employed as a head geek at SolarWinds. SolarWinds is not solar and it's not wind. Of course it's not. It's a software vendor that builds monitoring solutions that are either on-premises or in the cloud or MSP or all over the place. And as soon as I explain that and clear up the confusion about what SolarWinds is, then people are confused about what head geek is. So a head geek is not a developer. A head geek is also not marketing. It sure as hell is not sales. A head geek is kind of like an advocate, you know, like Microsoft, you know, all those advocates is kind of like that. But really what a head geek is a storyteller. What I do is I leverage the 30 years of experience I have building and maintaining and monitoring systems, and I turn them into narratives that help people understand, first of all, the value that monitoring has. I don't care what software you use or what vendor you go with, but oh, by the way, the company I work for makes some really good shit. But that's not important. What's important is that you understand that monitoring can build some really good value for you. And so that's what I do. That's what Head Geek is all about. You can find me on the interwebs. Of course, I have Twitter. I also have Instagram, but nobody looks at it because I'm old and fat. And I have a website and I have a podcast because I'm a white man and all white men must have their own podcast. But you can find that, and I think we're sharing the slides, so don't scribble those down. So monitoring engineer, let's get this out of the way right away. Yes, it's a thing. Even if you didn't think it's a thing, it's a thing. About 10 years ago, there was no such thing as an InfoSec professional either. They were just people who loved to dumpster dive through log files, or they really like to tweak their ACLs or whatever it is, and now we have InfoSec professionals everywhere. About 5 years ago, we started to see the rise of somebody who didn't care what the platform was, whether it was cloud or on-premises or some hybrid of the two, or if it was network or server. They just were interested in monitoring and collecting information and understanding failure modes, and that's a monitoring engineer. So don't get on my back, it's a thing. All right, so the questions of alerting, the questions of monitoring. The questions that I got asked started to fall into particular patterns, and I started to think of them as the 4 questions, sort of like Passover or Pesach, right? Except one of the questions wasn't, why is this alert different than the 800 you just sent me 5 minutes ago? Instead, they fell into categories like, why did I get this alert? Or why didn't I get an alert? Or what is actually being monitored on my system anyway? Or what could possibly alert on my systems? Those were the 4 that kept coming back over and over again. And so I made this joke, right? The 4 questions of monitoring, except after I made the joke, I realized that Judaism has a lot to say about IT in general and monitoring specifically. You see, we have a long and loving relationship in Judaism with questions and debate and dialogue. And so that's what I found was interesting. In fact, in the yeshiva system, the sort of Jewish educational system, the highest compliment a teacher can give you is not, "That's an amazing answer. What a great answer you have." No, the best compliment you can get, "Du fragst a gut kasha." You asked a really good question. And I think that's interesting about the point of view, and I think it helps us as IT folks to understand that. Now, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Isidore Rabi said it this way. He said, and I have to read this, "My mother made me a scientist without ever intending to. Every other mother in Brooklyn would ask her child, 'So, no, did you have to do the accent. If I don't do the accent, it doesn't work. So, no, did you learn anything today?' But not my mother. Nuh-uh. 'Izzy,' she would say, 'did you ask a good question today?' That difference, asking questions, is what made me become a scientist." So what's the teretz? What's the point I'm trying to make? You have to do the thumb thing. Do that. Did I miss one? Oh, there we go. Sorry. And of course, we have the 4 questions. I mentioned those earlier. The 4 questions. Why is tonight different from all other nights? Judaism has these sort of baked into the system. And again, as IT pros, I think that that's interesting. And so now, the teretz, the point I'm trying to get to. I think that in technology, we need to be just as open to the idea of questions, of questioning. We shouldn't feel defensive or offended if somebody questions it. I think we should take it as an opportunity to explore and really dive into the experience of discovery, because at the end of the day, most of us are in this career not because we want to stand in a place of "I already knew that" every day, but instead we love the thrill of the hunt. We love the idea of, "I have never seen that before. Let's find out what that is." That's why we stay in technology. That's why we build the systems and push the limits that we do. All right, so let's get down to work. The 4 questions. First one, why did I get an alert? Right? How many of you heard that one? Anybody? Okay. There is one and only one reason why you get this alert, that you get this question. Your alerts suck. That's just it. Okay, you get something like that. Your system is down. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this in the wild. No. I'm not saying it's like sort of like that. I'm saying that sentence as an email, that's all you get. This is worthless. Okay? But it happens all the time. How much better would it be if you had something like this? Now, this particular thing that I put together is very hardware-centric, and who cares? But the point is that I'm giving you a lot of information about what the system is, and when the event occurred, and what threshold it was expecting, and the name of the system, and the IP address of the system, and what DNS resolves the system to be. And I even give the name of the alert, because we all have 27, no, I'm not making that up, 27 alerts that all tell you that the front-end web system is over capacity. And I'd really like to know which one has been throwing alerts every 5 minutes, because I have a few to pick from. So giving more information tells the person, and same thing with the teretz, the more information you can give the recipient, because as monitoring engineers, we are often not the recipient of the alerts. We're just the one who inflict them on other people. So you want to give the recipient, whether it's yourself or not, as much information about what happened and why it happened and why they are receiving this alert, not somebody else. Why are you getting it? Because they're going to want to come back to you and say, actually, I'm not on that team anymore. Or actually, this kind of message should go to this other team, or whatever it is. Okay? Fine. Now, there's some roots to this, some Jewish roots to this. Pesach, or Passover, talks about the exodus out of Egypt. Fair enough. And the 4 questions, why is tonight different from all other nights? The answer to that, it starts off, Abadim Chayinu. My father was a wandering Aramaean. Now, who's the father who's a wandering Aramaean? Well, that was Jacob. Jacob's son was Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery. He had some adventures in Egypt, ended up being the second most important or powerful person in Egypt, invited his whole family to come live with him. They got stuck and were enslaved for 250 years. And now we need an exodus. We need to be freed from Egypt. So the answer to why is tonight different has to begin with the story before the story before the story before the story. We have to go back. And the thing as technology folks that we can learn from that is that context matters for our monitors and alerts. The history of why does this message look like this? Why am I getting it? Why am I getting it on weekends but not during the week? Whatever. That history matters. And not only are people asking, why did I get this alert? But also, why do these alerts exist at all? And if you can't answer that context, if you can't talk about, well, it started like this and it started like, maybe you don't need this alert anymore. Maybe it's obsolete, but if you don't have the history, the context, you're not going to be able to know that. It's just going to be, that's the way things are done here. And that's not helpful. That's not helpful for you as the monitoring engineer or monitoring provider, and it doesn't help your colleagues. Question number 2. Why didn't I get an alert? Something went bump in the middle of the night, and they were supposed to get a message, and they didn't get it, and now that slide from before, why? right, that's what they feel like. So what's going on here? Now this question is a little bit harder to answer than the first one, but it takes more effort, but it's still worth it. The fact is, it might be built that way. The alert might be designed to only trigger on weekends, or not on weekends, or business hours, or not on business hours. There might be a mute or shut up function because it was in change control that somebody forgot to turn off the shut up, and so it's still shutting up. Or maybe there was a ticket that happened the last time the event occurred, and no one cleared the ticket, so this just feels like it's a repeat, or whatever. But all these come down to, it was designed not to tell you at this moment. It also could be that there was an uncontrolled change that occurred. Maybe somebody canceled some credentials. Now it can't collect the data, and now there's no data to alert on, and therefore you're not going to get one. Or it could be that there was, a network topology change that happened. A VPN was shifted to go from this way to that way. It could be that it made a physical to virtual move, which seems like it's the same system, but in fact it is fundamentally a different system, and therefore all the things that you were collecting before don't actually count anymore. Could be any of those, or a few of those. And while it pains me to say it, it could be that monitoring failed. I know, not even monitoring is infallible. It could be that it stopped collecting data. I like the fact that you laughed at that, not the other things I've been saying. Okay, it could be that the agent stopped. It could be that the new image that you just pushed out didn't have the tracing data. Or my personal favorite, email is down and that's why you didn't get the email alert. And yes, I have been asked, how come I didn't get an alert about the email system being down? How would you like to get that? Psychic Friends Network? Like, that's the thing. So it could be that monitoring failed somewhere along the way. And it's important to understand that. So what's the deterrence? What's the point I'm trying to make? First of all, you need to understand and communicate those exceptions. You need to be able to have something that clearly documents for this set of monitors, this set of alerts, this set of conditions, you're only going to get it after hours or before hours or on Tuesdays or whatever it is. You need to be able to have that. Second of all, you want to save your receipts, because when we talk to people, they don't always remember it. Sometimes it's really convenient to say that they didn't remember anyway, even though they did, and therefore you want to save their receipts also if you possibly can. Because you want to be able to go back and say, no, we did talk about this. You also want to monitor your monitoring, and I know that sounds kind of weird, but the fact is that someone has to watch the watcher. How many of you have monitoring systems that are watching mission-critical, business-critical systems? Right? That means your monitoring is a business-critical system. And if your business-critical systems need monitoring, your monitoring needs it also, so that you know from a separate point of view that this thing that's critical is happy or not. It doesn't have to be an incredibly robust thing, but you have to have it. You also need to test your notification infrastructure every step along the way, from the thing that actually has the event all the way through, point by point, until the notification is received. You want to be able to have a test that runs the entire supply chain all the way down. You want to have something that does that regularly, and in fact, that's a monitor, so that you know when that's not working because all your other messages aren't working. And finally, you want to have the validation steps going, because when someone calls you at 2 o'clock in the morning and says, hey, how come I didn't get this? You want to be able to go bang, 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 bang. Ah, I see where the pipeline didn't work. Question number 3. What is being monitored on my systems? Not what's alerting on my systems right now. What data are you collecting on my systems? So to talk about this, first I need to make something clear. Alerts are not monitoring, and monitoring is not alerts. Because if you alert on everything, that's bad. Don't do that. But monitor everything, that's kind of good. You want to have that data. You want to be able to use that for forensics and capacity planning and performance checking and all that stuff. So collect all the metrics you want, but don't alert on everything. The two are not equivalent. You only alert on things that you can do something about. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I just need to be clear. Alerting is not equal to monitoring. Okay, so what is monitored on my system? You want to be able to produce something that looks like this. Yes, it's a spreadsheet, but the idea is that you have some programmatic, some automatic way to be able to say, on this system, we are collecting these metrics on these elements and these sub-elements, and that there is this particular setting right now, and there's a threshold, and there's a critical level, and a warning level, or whatever it is. And the point is not that you go into a spreadsheet and you type that up, because this will change 15 minutes after you hit save on the spreadsheet. You want to have something that will automatically do that for you, because it's going to change over and over again. Now the deterrents. One size does not fit all. One size barely fits some. If you do this for the hardware, you're going to have to do something completely different for the container environment. You're going to have to do something else completely different for the application or the services or the load balancing or whatever it is. You're going to have to hit this from multiple different directions to provide the automated view of my $my systems, whatever that is. Here's what we're picking up. Here's what we're collecting on it, which takes me to the 2 skill checks. I don't care what vendor you go with. I don't care what software you're using. At some point, you're going to have SQL or some version of SQL to be able to pull that data out. So if SQL is one of those things like, I don't do that, you might want to start to learn how to do that. Just a little bit, not a lot. You don't have to become a DBA. Also, don't tell anyone you know SQL because then you will be a DBA. That's the fastest way to become an accidental DBA. Bad idea. So you want to do that. The other skill check that people don't realize is Wireshark. Yes, because it doesn't matter how good the vendor documentation is, there is going to be something they didn't tell you about. And the only way you're going to find out that that information is being collected is to stick a tap on the wire and watch the data that's coming in and out and realize that this request went in and this data went out. So you're going to have to do that also. And finally, sort of as a last resort, look at the screens. Okay, the screens are going to tell you, hey, these data points are being collected. I don't know, but they are. I'm not saying use the screens as your automatic feed into what's being monitored on my system, but it's a good clue of where you need to start looking. So some Jewish roots. Everybody knows the 10 plagues. Everyone knows them. It doesn't matter that I'm not religious at all. Maybe they heard about it from reading Torah. Maybe they watched the movie The Prince of Egypt, or maybe they watched The Mummy, which had them in there too, or maybe that Charlton Heston movie or whatever. But everyone remembers them. Why? Because they are weird, and they are shocking, and they are really memorable. So black swans. A black swan event is a term for something that is so rare, it is mathematically impossible to predict. Like this event, right. We could never have predicted the particular set of events that would have occurred for today to have gone out the way it did. You couldn't have predicted that, exactly. So the trouble is that it is memorable, and the problem is that when that happens, people's first reaction is, we need to set up monitoring for that. We need to make sure this never happens again. The trouble is, we just said it's a black swan. It's unpredictable. That doesn't help anything. And this is where observability, the idea of DevOps observability, comes in. So one of the tenets is the idea of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. And I apologize for everyone for whom English is not their first language, because that was horrible. A known unknown is something that I know it could break, I just don't know when. Okay? I know CPU is going to spike, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, who knows? I know that memory is going to fail. I know a service is going to drop. I know containers are going to collapse. I know that the orchestrator is going to, take a vacation. Whatever it is, I know it's going to happen. I just don't know when. That's a known unknown event. An unknown unknown event is I don't know what might happen and I don't know when it's going to happen. But it's going to be bad. Yeah, it's going to be bad. It's going to affect me. Both are important to monitoring, but you have to understand the difference, because for your known unknowns, you want to do what I just showed you. You want to be able to say that these are the things that are being monitored for. These are the data points I'm collecting. These are the thresholds or the triggers. That's your known unknowns. For the unknown unknowns, do not document, and we're going to be able to catch this thing because this thing isn't going to happen again. You want to instead document the framework of your observability system, so that you say, this is how we look for what's called high cardinality events. This is how I look for the things that are so rare they might only ever happen once, but I'm going to tell you about it when it happens. And here's how I know it's rare. So there's 2 kinds of documentation that's going to save you from this question about what's being monitored on my systems. And I just want to clarify the difference. Okay, question number 4. What could alert? Now let's be clear. I'm not saying what is alerting on my systems right now. I'm saying, here are my systems. Again, $ my systems. For these, which of your 300 alerts might trigger for these systems ever at any particular point? That's a much harder question to answer. The first thing I want to talk about is, what is an alert? At the end of the day, an alert is unplanned work. It is the worst kind of work that we who work in technology have to do. It is an interruption of the worst sort. And therefore, in order to make it the least intrusive of unplanned work, we have to make sure that these things are actionable. That means that every single alert has to be able to be handled by a human. There is no such thing as an FYI alert. This is a hill I am willing to die on. No FYI alerts. If you can automate it, automate it. When this happens, we automatically try this, then we automatically try this, then we automatically try this. And if it doesn't clear up, finally we send a message to a human being and saying, hey, human, please use your wonderful human brain and try to figure this out because I'm out of ideas. Okay? That's the first thing. And you have to give the information about, I tried this and I tried this and I tried this and here were the results. So that the person who is hitting it at 2 o'clock in the morning in fuzzy bunny slippers, torn up jeans, and a t-shirt doesn't have to try to redo those things. So that's the first thing that you need to do. The other question about this is why? Why does this matter? Like, who cares how many alerts I have? I want you to think about the number of systems you have in your environment right now. And then think about the total number of alerts that exist in your monitoring system right now. And for any one of those alerts, what is the amount of staff time required to fix that issue? And how many of those alerts could possibly trigger simultaneously? What we're talking about is an environment we, as monitoring engineers, as monitoring practitioners, as people who just do monitoring, whatever, we can actually significantly impact our business financially and also in terms of workflow because of that unplanned work. You need to be able to say, on this set of systems, here are all the alerts that might possibly affect you. It's going to look something, that's what I just said. Yes, there's the terrets. Yay! It's going to look something like this. Again, automatically generating this list. This isn't about hiring an intern and having them get a spreadsheet and type it all in, because as soon as they hit save, it's different. You have to be able to automatically generate this to say, for this one system, these 15 alerts could possibly trigger at these particular times. And then you have to give that to the people who consume the alert, who get the alert. Because what you're telling them is, this is the amount of unplanned work I might hand you at any given moment. And they have to be on board for that. They have to know that this is what they might possibly get. Oh, this is not okay. Well, okay, then I cannot tell you about it. No, you have to tell me about it. I mean, it's a very circular conversation, but they have to be aware that this could happen. Otherwise, you end up at 3 o'clock in the morning with all hands on deck, thousands of dollars of people time invested, and then, you know, nobody can come to work the next day because they're all totally strung out because they were trying to fix things last night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be able to answer it, and again, in an automated way. So, the Jewish roots of this. During the Passover Seder, the meal, we talk about 4 very peculiar children. Some people refer to them as the wise child, the wicked child, the simple child, and the silent child. I like to use all S's. I like alliteration in English, so the scholar, the skeptic, the simple, and the silent. And these each have a different way of asking, what the hell is going on here? And you answer them differently. The scholar, you give details. The skeptic, I'll talk about in a minute. The simple child, you just give a very simple answer. The silent child, you get them really excited so that they start to answer the question. So what's the point of that? Well, the point is that we meet people where they are. That when they come in to meet with us as monitoring aficionados, people who enjoy monitoring, we want to make sure that we're not giving the scholar's answer to the simple manager, because it's going to bore and overwhelm them. At the same time, if somebody comes in and says, no, I want to understand how are you collecting the data. We don't say, monitoring is a very wonderful technology and we can tell you all. We want to give them the details if they want it. But you have to know who you're talking to and you have to meet them where they are. That's the first thing. The second thing, okay, let's talk about the wicked child, the skeptic. Comes in, he's not only skeptical, he's dismissive, he's petulant, all right? And the rabbis talk about how to answer him. But the first thing they say is, please don't forget, he came to the table. He didn't have to. He could have left. He could have never shown up. No, the skeptic came in and said, I want to know what all this stuff is about for you, because I'm really not on board. The interesting thing is we give the skeptic the same answer we give the simple child. And that's the thing. They tell you, look past the snark. Ignore the emotion that's involved. Listen for the actual question. That's the thing that we need to remember. Because the skeptic is actually your best friend. The skeptic is the one who's going to push you and say, no, I want to know for real. Why are you waking me up like this? What are you doing with this? Why are you taking system cycles that I have to pay for on Amazon and collect this data? What good is this to you? Because I don't want it. And it gives you a chance to say, we've always done it here? Or maybe not. That's a really helpful person wrapped in a really nasty package. But it's a really helpful person, and you want to remember that. Okay, fifth question. What do you monitor standard? Oops, I thought I said 4. Yeah, there's 5. So during the Passover Seder, actually in the Talmud, they talked about, there's a debate about whether or not we're supposed to drink 4 or 5 cups of wine during the Seder. And there's a long argument about whether it is. So we don't know whether there's 4 or 5 questions, so I decided there's going to be, an extra question in there. But before I get into it, I do want to point out that wine is symbolic of joy. And working in technology, I think it's really easy to have our lives with this brief moment of sort of insane euphoria punctuated by really long stretches of depression. And we need to take a moment, a longer moment, and celebrate the successes. To take a minute and just bask in the fact that we did something good, we did something right. No matter how many times in a given session it occurs. We drink 4 full cups of wine during the Passover Seder, even though, well, I had 1 glass, 2 minutes ago. Nope, you're having another one now. Every time there's a success, reward yourself. Take a moment. Whatever, dance, do a dance of joy. Whatever it takes, but take a minute to recognize that went well. Because otherwise, it is going to be a hard slog. I said there was a debate in the Talmud, in the Gemara, about whether there's 4 or 5 cups of wine, and it was never resolved. There isn't an answer to that. And that's important. That's an important lesson for us who work in technology also. That even though there's no answer, went around and around, there's no answer, that doesn't mean we disengage. That doesn't mean that we say, oh, well, sucks to be me, I'm never going to get that one fixed. No, we actually keep coming back to it. We keep engaging with the problem. We keep on trying to figure out what's going on, to see if maybe after a year or a month or a day or a nap, we have a fresh perspective that we can bring to this, and therefore we're able to approach the problem differently. It's just like technology. Okay, so that question, what do you monitor standard? Why do I care about this question? Because otherwise your conversation with the people who consume monitoring is very frustrating. It goes something like this. They come into your office and they say, all right, here are my systems, I need you to monitor them. And says, great, you want anything extra? And they're saying like, I don't know what you do normal. So how would I know what extra is? Oh, come on, we got SNMP and we have IPSLA, a little bit of NetFlow, and I have some tracing, just like we always do for everything else. And meanwhile, their eyes have rolled up in their head because they don't care. And they don't know what you said anyway. And you're getting frustrated, and they're getting frustrated. We need to be able to provide the consumers of monitoring with a clear list. Here, oh, you have a Java-based application that's in the DMZ? Here are the things that we do automatically. You spin it up, you automatically get this. Oh, you've got an on-prem application that's actually using a Microsoft SQL backend and PHP? Fantastic. Here's how we instrument that. You want to be able to do that. Because then they look at it and say, wow, this is like way more than I ever wanted. Or maybe they say, well, this is good, but there's these 3 other things that aren't here. Oh, okay, I can do that for you. But it's a much calmer, much more sane, much friendlier conversation. So that's also what you need to do. So this is the mostly unnecessary summary. You've been here, so you heard me, so I don't really need to summarize. But the point is that if you build your monitoring to be able to answer those 5 questions, that your monitoring is going to be better prepared for the stresses that are going to get put on it. Because I didn't make up these questions just to make you do more work. This is based on all the monitoring systems I've had to build for the last 20 years in multiple different systems. That these questions kept coming back. So build your systems to address these up front, and you'll be able to respond to them better. It also means that you will be a better advocate for your monitoring environment. You'll be able to explain, why is it here? Why am I doing this? There's nothing more frustrating than turning up monitoring just to have the system owner shut it back down again. Oh, it's just noise. I don't need it. I think it crashed my system anyway. No, that's not fun. I'm not doing this. I don't get paid by the bushel for monitors. So I want them to appreciate that. And finally, if you have the ability to answer these questions quickly, you won't have to spend a lot of time answering the questions. You can get to building better monitors, better reports, and better systems, or what I call the good stuff. Now, if you have more questions, this entire talk is actually based on a book I wrote. There it is. You can find it anywhere fine monitoring manifestos are sold. It's an ebook. It's also a physical book. You can get it on Amazon. It's all over the place. That's fine. Or you can find me after this. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.